President Uhuru Kenyatta has declined to appoint a tribunal to investigate bribery allegations against Supreme Court Judge Justice Philip Tunoi, citing a pending judicial consideration on Justice Tunoi's retirement age. The move comes just a day before the expiry of the 14 days within which the president is required by law to form a tribunal. A letter by the Chief of Staff and Head of Public Service Joseph Kenywa to the Chief Justice Dr. Willy Mutunga says forming tribunal as recommended by the Judicial Service Commission would create a constitutional crisis. And we now want to speak to our Rita Tinina, who's joining us from our City Center studio for details into this developing story. Rita, thank you very much for joining us. Maybe you can just take us through the details of this particular letter.
Well, Betty, before we get to the details of the letter, this decision by the president not to appoint a tribunal, of course, coming just hours before the expiry of the 14 days set by the law within which he should appoint a tribunal after receiving a petition. Remember, the Judicial Service Commission, a special committee of the Judicial Service Commission, investigated the bribery allegations against Justice Philip Tunoi within 7 days. It heard from several people. It interrogated Justice Tunoi, Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero, as well as Geoffrey Kiplagat, who saw the affidavit that implicated Tunoi in the bribery allegations. And after those investigations, then it made the recommendation that the president should form a tribunal. And its petition, it was transmitted to the president on the 9th of February, so the 14 days would be expiring tomorrow. And critics as well as analysts have been counting down, arguing that, the president previously has not taken such a long time. He has not waited until the last minute to appoint a tribunal. For instance, in the case, the tribunal to investigate the dissolution of the Makueni County, as well as the tribunal to investigate EACC, former EACC Chair Mumo Matemu and Vice Chair Irene Keino. So perhaps they were counting down to tomorrow at the expiry of that deadline, 14-day deadline, of course, which would have legal as well as political implications for the president. Now, coming to that letter, this is the letter, as you mentioned there, by the head of public service and chief of staff, Joseph Kenywa, to the Chief Justice and Chair of the Judicial Service Commission, Dr. Willy Mutunga. And the letter does not talk about the back and forth. There has been the back and forth between the Judicial Service Commission and State House saying that in the transmittal of documents for the petition, the Judicial Service Commission did not include some crucial documents. The JSC, on the other hand, saying it transmitted all the documents, including the transmittal letter, the petition, as well as the investigation report into the bribery allegations against Justice Philip Tunoi. But this letter does not talk about the missing documents. It stipulates that, yes, the Judicial Service Commission under the law should present the petition to the president, and the president should, within 14 days after receiving the petition, then appoint a tribunal. It talks about the members that the tribunal should constitute, including a chairperson and 3 other members from persons who hold or have held offices as a judge, 1 advocate, and so on. But it goes on now to give the reason why the president will not be appointing a tribunal. After all, remember, Justice Philip Tunoi, he has been challenging his retirement age. He lost that case at the High Court. The High Court ruled that judges should retire at the age of 70. He moved to the Court of Appeal on grounds that he was appointed as judge under the old constitution, which sets the retirement age at 74, and not under the new constitution, which set the retirement age at 70. So that is the appeal that the State House is quoting. And this letter says in one paragraph that at this particular moment in time, when the appeal is still pending and where the status of the judge is subject to judicial consideration, implementing the recommendation of the Judicial Service Commission in line with Article 168, subsection 5, would create a constitutional crisis. The letter goes on to say that we therefore propose that we await the outcome of the judicial process, after which we shall process the petition as required by the Constitution and the law. So those are the reasons by State House for the president not to appoint that tribunal just hours, I might say, to the expiry of the 14 days within which he should, or the law states that he should appoint a tribunal. Of course, perhaps the president waiting until the last minute to insulate himself against what would have been legal or political ramifications. If he failed to appoint a tribunal within the 14 days, he would even face an impeachment motion on several grounds, including a gross violation of the Constitution. So perhaps for State House, just waiting to see what the ruling by the Court of Appeal, the hearing on Justice Tunoi's retirement age is ongoing, and State House here says that they will have to await the outcome of that ruling before proceeding with the recommendation by the Judicial Service Commission. Betty.
Right, Rita, thank you very much for that detailed report in there on this particular issue. And the story of Justice Tunoi is one which places others on their defense. Now placed on his back, Justice Philip Tunoi is a man walking a tight judicial rope. Well, Dennis Onsarigo explores the man, Justice Philip Tunoi.
And as the man who decides which way the law swings has kicked off a judicial storm in the country. The man at the center of the bribery allegations, Geoffrey Kiplagat, the radio journalist who stormed the corridors of justice with his 2 million shillings bribery claim. The man at Nairobi Governor's office, John Osogo. The man who allegedly fixed the entire scheme, Nairobi businessman Mike Njeru and others. Legal experts say the unfolding drama at the highest court on the land could turn into one of the biggest judicial processes the country has witnessed in the recent past. The nearest the judiciary came under serious scrutiny was the resignation of Chief Justice Bernard Chunga. Chunga was forced out after a dramatic show, quitting 1 week after maintaining he was not stepping down. So what exactly will the Justice Tunoi Tribunal be seeking to do?
The Constitution provides that a judge must conduct himself in a manner that is beyond reproach. So if a judge has contact with persons who have matters before him, then that is not proper. It is unethical, it is professionally not allowed. So the first thing they may want to look at is the communication.
A Judicial Service Committee had recommended the setting up of a tribunal on the basis that the judge could have conducted himself improperly and wanted the bribery allegations against the judge probed further.
The next thing that has not been established is whether money changed hands and if that money influenced the position of not only that judge but the entire bench.
It was in this church in Westlands where Justice Philip Tunoi was to meet 3 people: John Osogo from the governor's office, Geoffrey Kiplagat, the convener of the meeting, and Nairobi businessman Mike Njeru. After the morning service, the judge did not meet either of them. The judge later sent a text message to Geoffrey Kiplagat telling him he was unable to meet him. It was the second time in many days the judge was declining to have a meeting with the 3. But those allegations and more might be rendered useless if a court ruling decides against Justice Tunoi.
Which would then mean that anything that has happened from the point he was supposed to have retired to Friday, when the ruling will be delivered, amounts to nothing. Which would then mean that even the decision which was arrived at by the Judicial Service Commission to recommend that the President form a tribunal to investigate him will also be rendered nugatory. In which case, and this will be a tragedy, Kenyans will not have an opportunity to really know what transpired between Justice Tunoi and Evans Kidero.
The judge has contested the decision to have him retired because of age. Indeed, if the judge decides to contest the Court of Appeal ruling, then the matter will now be placed before the very bench that wanted him investigated, the Supreme Court. Legal pundits say the burden of proof now shifts from the man who accuses the judge of bribery claims to the judge now at the center of a legal tussle.
Scheduled to the Judicial Service Act of 2011 provides that the kind of evidence that the tribunal is not, they are not in a corner where they have to follow the strict rules of evidence. They can accommodate as many things that are well beyond what the Evidence Act may actually provide for, so long as that at the end of the day they're able to prove
if he is to fight, he has to disprove the contents of the affidavit by Kiplangat. He has to be able to demonstrate that he was not even at that scene that was described by Kiplangat.
Denson Sarigo, KTN Prime.
How is that enjoyable? Well, that's it for KTN Newsdesk. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Betty Okari.